Gagan and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go. Pick and choose your own best-of-breed insurtech and data providers with Advantage Go's ecosystem. When I meet someone to record an interview, they often ask me how long the podcast is going to be. My stock answer is that it entirely depends upon them. Some people talk more than others, and some people pack an awful lot into a lot less time, while others take longer to fully express themselves. You also never quite know where the conversation is going, and that's a huge variable. Today's podcast is lively, fun, and gets straight to the point. That's because it entirely reflects our interviewee. Kevin Gill is the chairman of IRLA, the Insurance and Reinsurance Legacy Association. IRLA is the UK trade body that represents insurance and reinsurance legacy management professionals, and this interview will bring you right up to date with everything that's happening in this increasingly mature and sophisticated segment of the marketplace. As legacy becomes ever more embedded as an essential, trusted service provider and capital partner for the live market, we discuss how that relationship is evolving and where it might end up in the long term. The legacy market also has its own cycles, independent of the live market, and so we look at the relative state of the two markets and how this affects deal making. We also take the temperature of how the legacy sector feels about some of the more problematic recent live underwriting years, as well as looking at emerging loss trends and prospects for the application of emerging technologies such as AI to the sector. The portrait that emerges is of a confident, professionalised and vibrant segment that is ready to trade and is looking at interesting growth opportunities as some of the soft market underwriting years begin to mature. Kevin is a breath of fresh air, and there are no subjects left off the table. My bet is that you'll finish this episode wanting more. Enjoy the podcast.
Kevin, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be here.
It's really nice to have you. For anyone who doesn't know you, listening to the podcast, why don't you tell them about yourself and your career to date?
Sure. I made a big career decision to get into legacy by breaking my leg playing rugby. I was a trainee auditor in Bristol, and I had to drive to Cheltenham and Gloucester and Swindon to do my audits, and then broke my leg playing rugby, so I couldn't go and do that. And I now got seconded to a little place called Cooper's Lybrand Insurance Services.
Right, in Bristol?
In Bristol, who did all the run-offs for the bus insurance companies that were failing back in the early 1990s. So when Lloyd's had its problems...
Well, there's plenty of it then.
Yeah, exactly. Asbestos and the LMX spiral, but they hit the company market too. So I did a little company called Continental Insurance of London, Fremont, UK, and Charter Re, all those old names, and learnt to do run-off that way around.
And then how did you get into IRLA?
So I was asked by Simon Barnes of Zurich, who was then the treasurer of IRLA, would I join the board of IRLA? I said, yes, I would. And in no time at all, Simon had gotten to become treasurer of IRLA, and then no time at all, they asked me to be chairman of IRLA. So I've been on the IRLA board for about 5 years now.
And IRLA, how did it come about? All trade bodies have a reason to exist. So what was IRLA all about?
So the original guys of IRLA was ARC, the Associated Runoff Companies.
Yeah, and I suppose there was a time, about 15, 20 years ago, I remember when it changed over. And I suppose there was that moment where we didn't want to be called runoff anymore.
Correct.
Because whatever negative connotations, I don't think it would actually have that connotation anymore, to be fair.
No. And I think it's part of its growing, it rebranded to IRLA.
And the L in IRLA is legacy.
Yes, yeah. And its primary driver is to educate the marketplace, to provide a network for the marketplace, and then to represent the marketplace. And I think over the 25 years that IRLA's been in existence now, it's been really strong around the education and networking side, and we want to push more of the promotion side of the marketplace now.
But you don't really do much lobbying, that kind of thing? Or
No, if there's the relevant regulatory changes come along, we'll do our piece and make submissions. And simply now we've got a Bermuda branch, and actually one of the reasons we've got a Bermuda chapter going is the BMA wanted a voice from the legacy sector to chip in from, so we've created a IRLA Bermuda now.
And I suppose, yeah, as Bermuda has matured, of course, it has more legacy the longer you go into insurance.
Yeah, indeed.
I've always thought it's the great comfort of anyone working in insurance is that even if we stopped underwriting all insurance and the London market, for example, lost all its licenses and was downgraded to zero as of now and shut down, and there was no more live underwriting, we'd still probably be dealing with the legacy for another 100 years.
Well, at least that. Well, if you look at the PPO orders we're getting, that's 50, 60, 70 years of run-off there.
This is periodic payment orders.
Off the motor.
These are for serious bodily injury, aren't they? They tend to be. Yeah, I mean, that must be hard to deal with.
But on that run-off forever, though, one of the more recent regulatory changes for the live market is to put together solvent exit analysis to show live insurers how they could exit the market safely and securely, which is effectively a run-off solution.
So you've just also had your conference,
Yeah.
annual conference, which is down in Brighton every year, isn't it? So you've really been able to take the temperature of what's going on. You've met up with people you haven't seen maybe for a year, 6 months. What's top of the agenda at the moment for IRLA?
So a really positive feel from Brighton this year. I think with all the bigger deals we're seeing in the marketplace now, a lot of the loss portfolio transfers and ADCs that the larger companies are writing, we are providing real value to the life insurance market. And it's a place we've never really been to before. So if you look at that opportunity that comes from that, we're really just scratching the surface of what this market can provide to the live marketplace. So that was a real positivity around that. I think the other thing that I really noticed in this year is around the talent programs that we've been bringing in. We've got new skills coming to the marketplace around chief technology officers, chief investment officers, looking at that side of the organisation, and actually just bringing through young talent. The room was full of young talent doing different things. That was really nice to see.
There's something that I think that's probably the greatest development of certainly of the last 30 years would have been, yes, perhaps when I was a young broker and occasionally asked to, can you go and quickly deal with some stock adjustment, additional premium that's been sitting around gathering dust for 10 years or whatever. And I might meet an underwriter who is slowly eking out. They were looking at perhaps as, towards retirement as a way of making a living until they finally did pick up their pension. It's nothing like that these days. This is an actual career that perhaps was an end of career for some underwriters.
Correct. I think the market's gone full circle in that regard. Now, I think lots of people are coming to the market, whether they're graduates or school leaver, and they see a career in an interesting, challenging industry.
And a slightly different challenge. You are paying for claims and you're trying to do that in the most efficient possible way. Again, which is a completely different challenge. And you're professional claims payers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you've got the claims side of things, you've got the investment, the balance sheet side of things, the assets management side of things, you've got the finance side of things, you're facing off to professional investors into the marketplace as well. So there's such a broad range of careers within the legacy industry now.
And the other thing I've always found fascinating about the legacy market is that it can be in a different state. These are different pools of capital. And, sometimes your pool of capital could be overflowing when the live market could be rather running dry.
Yeah.
And that's what's always been really interesting. Certainly, I think 3 or 4 years ago, when the live market was pretty hard and short of capital, there was plenty of capital available in the legacy market, which is, of course, a boon because some of those legacy deals could then free up that short capital in the live market and they could deploy that on new underwriting. Indeed.
And it could be quite quick at deploying that capital, 3-6 months and the capital's in, the capital's refreshed and then the underwriting go on and write some new business.
Yeah. So what's the state of the market at the moment in terms of IRLA members? What's the availability of capital to them, for example?
It's still quite good. The legacy industry is good at recycling its own capital anyway. That's what it does, right? It gets the liabilities in, manages them down, and it recycles its own capital. So it will refresh its own capital. The other thing as well is that you've seen the Sixth Street coming by Enstar and to back Enstar with a long-term fund. So it sees a long-term future in people like Enstar. And I think certainly those larger players have a nice future doing the larger deals, but actually the market is full of all shapes and sizes, trying to do different deals in different geographies with different liabilities at different sizes. And a lot of that is private capital. And again, it sees a long-term play in back in this industry.
And we're talking about institutional capital at a very high level, a very, very high pedigree these days. So I suppose theoretically, if the investment case is good enough, there is going to be a serious amount of capital available.
Yes.
If it's required. If the opportunity can be presented.
Yeah, and if I go back to my point earlier around, if you look at the LPT type solutions we're providing that capital relief at the moment, we are literally just scratching the surface of the live market. We could double the size of this market quite easily in the next 5-10 years, and that will need additional capital come into it.
Obviously, the live market's been doing really well. How does that affect demand? And obviously, when they're particularly pleased with themselves, they're regenerating their own capital because it's being replenished through underwriting profits and sub 90, sub 80 sometimes combined ratios, lots of money floating around. How does it affect demand? How does it affect their relationship with you?
So I think the legacy market can play with the live market no matter what cycle it's going through. So obviously in the hard market, we can provide capital to place capital for them or supply them with capital to write new business going forward. I think when it's a bit softer, they sometimes want to just draw a line under business and move it on. And certainly when you get new management teams coming in, they want to draw a line. And again, the legacy market can provide a solution, just draw a line under back years and move it on. But obviously it's important to get the pricing right. And sometimes you see in soft years, you get a bid-ask spread not quite touching, but over time the pricing points will touch.
So I suppose if you're in the business of providing capital efficiency to the live market, the markets that understand and know how to access the legacy market and use it properly in an equitable way that works for both of you, then I suppose you're right to say it wouldn't make any difference really whether that had been a profitable or an unprofitable book of business. Yes. Ultimately, there comes a point where there's a capital efficient solution that you can provide that you can do better than they can, and therefore it works for both of you.
Indeed. And I think on that point, it's interesting the last, say, 5 years, the number of insurance brokers have got into this marketplace. to effectively do that trade between the live market and the legacy market. All the major brokers now have got teams to do these capital relief and legacy solutions.
Yeah, and you meet the caliber of those people and you think, well, there's some pretty smart people and they've spotted this opportunity. They know what they're doing. And, you always think, yeah, I'm pretty impressed. And you used to think, yeah, these are some good folks here doing this. What's interesting also, the development of the last decade is the legacy market getting closer and closer to live. How close do you think you could be, particularly now as the world gets more digital and there's less and less friction, more and more understanding, more and more data about what is in those books, whereas perhaps in the olden days, in the days of pen and ink, it took longer to work out what you had written and then really work out what it had now cost you before you had more certainty around that. These days, it seems we can get closer and closer. You can get closer and closer to where that pen is right now.
Yeah.
How close do you think we'll be able to get? So there's always a suboptimal, there's no point becoming a live underwriter.
No, exactly. And I think there's also an element of, if a runoff is going to go quite quickly, there's no point touching it, because by the time you've done the diligence and done the pricing, the books move forward type stuff. But I think once you get a length of a year or two of a tail, then the legacy market can attach to it. And again, what we may see in the marketplace is repeat business. So if a legacy carrier is used to a line of business, see it's been written over a number of years, it can get closer and closer to that tail to take that liability off the live carrier.
So I'm like, I'm your year 4, well, like we have in Lloyd's of London, year 4 reinsurance to close. You can take your profits. Thank you very much. And then I'll deal with the rest of it.
I think that would be a great place for the company market to get to. Bit like an RSTC after 3 years, just refresh the capital, or 2 years, just refresh and move on.
Give certainty. They know that those results that they're putting out are absolutely rock solid because that book is closed as far as they're concerned.
Well, they're effectively swapping reserving risk and yield risk for certainty.
You don't think we're ever going to end up with a situation where we're going to have insurance day traders and you'll be the ones providing the certainty at 5 p.m. when the market closes?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but the analogy I do have with this marketplace, if you look at the banking market, the retail sector, we all bank with the high street banks. Literally, that securitized quite quickly, moved off into other markets, right? Well, the insurance market could get closer to that market, become a retail front of house for the insurance market, and then once the retail risk gets so far down its track, whether it's months or years, it's just moved into a secondary market.
I think that's really interesting. And also, another thing we've seen with live is, as things are digitizing, getting more technologically savvy, and obviously we think that's only going to accelerate, particularly in the London market, when some of the fundamental reforms get signed off and finally get built. But we've got algorithmic underwriting, we've got smart follow tracker style capital, we've got also every major broker with a book big enough to support the technology investment is doing something very similar, where they're getting a leader and a potential alternative leader and maybe another alternative leader, and then the rest is going to be fired off down a chute, at which it would all be placed by a following facility that follows X broker or Y broker, and all doing very similar things. But again, providing with all those underwriters with a huge amount of data, everything that they need to be able to show to the regulator that they've done a diligent job on underwriting. Do you think, again, legacy is going to become part of that solution? You could pre-pack the legacy for XYZ large broker facility. So again, year 4, if you want to take the option, you can snap your fingers and take profit.
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet with that, because I think there's enough capital in the legacy market to write on a solo basis. We've seen a bit of collaboration across some deals, but actually maybe in the future, if there's a need for extra capacity, they could bundle something up and people follow through, but I think that's a way off yet.
Yeah.
But what I think is important there, Mark, is that the legacy sector stays up to date with the technology, so they can lock into the books of business coming out. So they've got to keep up with what Lloyd's are doing, because they write a lot of RTs anyway in Lloyd's market, so they keep pace with that.
Yes.
But also, as the live market moves forward with technology, the legacy market's got to be behind it too, because we'll take those portfolios out of these clean technology systems and want to drop into their clean technology systems as well.
Yes, so you've got to make those parallel investments to be able to understand the inputs that are now coming to you. But hopefully, well, they're going to be investments that will pay a lot of dividends, because you can have better. Doing the diligence, one hopes, will become a lot quicker.
Yeah, and they're certainly tapping into the value of the data they've got there, but also, doing their diligence a lot quicker.
Just to kind of put that getting closer to live to bed as a topic, obviously we had a situation maybe 5 or 6 years ago where different legacy entities did own some live markets. Now that seems to have been normalised again, looking back on it, was it a successful period? Was it a successful experiment?
You could see why the market did it at the time. I don't see an appetite for it again now or in the near future. What I do see some of the legacy players doing, though, is thinking more broadly about what they use their infrastructure for. So some of them are providing services to other live providers, whether it's around MGAs or other service providing that. So you can see a service provision coming. Again, if you go back in history, a lot of the original legacy players did have a servicing arm too. So you're seeing that coming back around again.
Do you think there's a big opportunity there in terms of, particularly with the distribution, we're seeing so much more going through MGAs, for example?
Yeah, and certainly around the claims function, because the legacy market is very skilled at managing claims. There'll be experts at certain lines of claims type stuff, and therefore the live market, the MGAs could tap into that skill base and obviously get the economies of scale that comes from that as well.
Yeah, because I suppose, yes, there's no point if you've got 10% support of an MGA as paper provider, you don't want to end up having to run off your 10% and everyone else having to take their 10% share out. And it would be an obvious opportunity for someone who's good at running off claims, who's got the scale, to say, well, I'll do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see that could be a big opportunity. And as more and more premium is being distributed that way, then it makes a ton of sense.
And there's likely to be some MGAs that come and go for this marketplace too as well. So somebody needs to service that tail that an MGA leaves behind.
Absolutely, yes. Of course, we're in another, it seems to have been almost a permanent boom for MGAs because we had a bit of a recession, but then they were fired back up again in no time. And it almost does seem to be a secular change in the way that some insurance is being transacted, and certainly does seem to be a very attractive career path for underwriters and be able to sort of own the equity in their underwriting and not have to worry about the ratings, the compliance and capital quite so much. That's another set of skills for somebody else to deal with. Again, so yes, it would dovetail with legacy as well. And so, actually, once a claim's in its 5th or 6th year, do I really need to be that in touch with it? I'm fully aware of what it was, and I've learned all the lessons from it.
Yeah, move it on.
We do have to just wait for it to be settled finally because it's in a court case or it's something. You're the experts. The live market's been fretting. Obviously, we can cast our net at different US liability, and obviously this is your bread and butter. Difficult US liability underwriting years have been the making of the legacy industry, obviously the making and breaking of all of us in many ways. Obviously, it depends where you start looking, whether it's 2013 or 2014 or 2012, whatever, to 2017 or 16 or 18 or 19 or whatever 4 or 5 year period you want to look at. We know that the underwriting has not been great there on the life side, and we've had reserve strengthening in those years. What's your view on those in terms of how mature they are and whether they are something that worries you? Because, of course, some of these years are, you're as exposed or more exposed to them than the live market is.
Yeah, perhaps where some of the early ones were written, then they'll be tracking the similar experience. But I think over that period, as much as a number of deals were brought to the marketplace, not that many were done. I think the bid-ask spread was too far wide apart. So I think as we've seen development come through and reserve strengthening come through, I think that bid-ask spread is getting closer. You may see those deals come back and clear through in due course. But we see that quite typically with lots of markets. Now, go back in the day when APH was an unknown, then it got to a point where everybody traded APH. UKEL was the same point. No one knew where that was going, and suddenly everybody traded UKEL. So you can see a point in time where everybody that gets comfortable with the development of a claims history and the market begins to transact.
There's quite a lot of business, business to be done because it's starting to mature.
Yes, as the development patterns come through.
It was something that did put you off at the time because there was too much uncertainty.
Yeah, but I think the legacy market is good at monitoring what the live market does, so it knows when the softer years are written and that sort of stuff. So it does track what the live market is up to. So when they get presented a portfolio, they'll think, well, was this written in a soft market, hard market? What was going on? What was the underwriting thinking? So getting close to the live underwriting is one of the skills that the legacy market seeks to do.
You are the ultimate second opinion on that book, aren't you?
Yeah.
This is a big question. We're always on the lookout for the next asbestos or UK employers liability or whatever it is going to be. These days, there are a lot more companies out there, technology-focused companies, interesting companies, monitoring the world and monitoring court cases, and now with artificial intelligence, able to read every court case and every judgment and every plaintiff's claim, in minute detail. What's your gut feeling of what the next asbestos might be? We know there's these forever plastics and other things.
Yeah, I think the one that is being monitored is PFAS, the forever plastics thing, and where that might go, because that's quite endemic wherever it is if it comes through.
Yeah, it's in everything.
It's everything. So I think there's an eye watching that.
But I suppose these things are far too soon.
Yeah, long way away.
They haven't even got as far as being an exclusion yet, so they're unlikely to be crossing your desk, or that obviously they're in all the legacy books as well.
Yeah.
But it all depends.
Yeah, and it depends which years are affected and whether your insurance coverage attached to those years as well. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Lots of ifs and buts still on that.
Yes, and of course, if there's losses occurring coverage or not,
yeah,
and if it's claims made, it's a completely different kettle of fish, absolutely. It's rare moment where we've had a few different failures. Has that dented anyone's confidence? Were they big enough to cause any ripples in the market?
Very much idiosyncratic situations. I don't think they've created a big ripple at all. If you look at the sector more broadly, it enjoys a really good reputation with the regulators, and I think the industry is stronger and more resilient than it ever has been. Again, you come back and look at the talent in the marketplace, the different skills we've got in the marketplace, the stronger balance sheets in the marketplace. I think the sector is generally stronger. So I think they are idiosyncratic.
Yes, I think there's always going to be a reason for any particular failure. And I suppose, is it really a failure if something is old enough? If it got to the point where we're talking about a very small number of liabilities, then at that point, and if they're 40 or 50 or 60 years old, then actually at that point, is it really a failure at some point, I suppose?
Yeah, and it's not really stopped the investors looking at the marketplace and being interested in this, what this marketplace can do for them.
That's the fundamental question. It would only be a problem if it then put people off investing in the sector and thinking they're not quite sure what they're getting themselves into. We mentioned about technology. I'm asking everyone about AI because it's fascinating what's going on. I imagine there must be some great use cases for AI within the legacy sector, particularly trying to analyse huge amounts of information.
Lots of potential. Even on the legacy books, that they can interrogate that, find out patterns and information they wouldn't have otherwise found. So AI can do a lot on the books they've already got. I think it helps with diligence and assessment and pricing of new risks as well. I think also just general help with processing as well, to speed things up, so there's an efficiency point with it as well. So I think there's lots of potential for it. Everybody's experimenting at the moment, is what I've seen, but I think everybody's looking at it to make good use of it.
I suppose it'd be wonderful. It's like having an indefatigable intern or someone who's very smart, but who can read every court case that is in your book.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be fascinating.
Yeah, and also look for claim patterns as well. So when that next book comes forward, when they look for pricing it, they're better informed because they've found some patterns in their existing data that a human would never have found.
Yeah. How much has it got in this particular county, in this particular state in the US? I'm really worried about that.
Yeah.
Or, and it's that lawyer. Is that plaintiff lawyer? I'm worried.
Well, exactly. To put those things together. The industry is really excited about what AI can do for it.
And of course, just all the low-hanging fruit of processing. You've got lots of paper to shift around, of course. And by definition, it's some of the stuff that was less technological because it's older. Yeah. Still the odd suitcase full of files knocking around, I'm sure, occasionally going up to Cheltenham and Gloucester.
Yeah, but that's the point. I think the legacy sector still has to deal with paper stuff that comes its way, or just historically it was
stuff that was never electronic.
Exactly, or on some mainframe somewhere, and we're still using modern technology on the front end of stuff. So it's quite a wide range now.
Yes, there's the legacy of legacy is always going to be there. Or do you think that, yes, will there be technology that will be good at digitizing a lot of that stuff?
Yeah, a lot of it has gone digital. A lot has.
Because, if you've got something that will effectively go and read all those documents for you and upload them and put them in a structured format, then that's going to be really helpful. Because at least I suppose most of them are at least electronic in some sense.
Yeah. I'm still sure we can find some microfiches around somewhere though.
Yes, I'm sure there are. Yeah, old telexes and goodness knows. Of course, telexes are terrible because they go yellow and you can't read them after about 10 years. Certainly, yes. I think we've come to the list of all the things I wanted to talk about. So is there anything that you want to add that we haven't mentioned that we should have done?
I don't think so. Just think about this though. With all the new talent coming into the marketplace and the industry being 25, 30 years old, there's a generational shift going on. And actually, we've almost gone full circle in this sector in that a lot of the people who started their careers in the sector are leaving the sector with a lot of knowledge. So we've got to be passing that knowledge back down into the sector to keep it going.
Yeah, so you were saying at the beginning that it's a big focus of IRLA is that training. And so you've got specific modules and that kind of CII type.
It's not CII, but I think it can come back to this industry starting claims, and it's good at claims, and its heart is claims, and actually just understanding that ability to manage claims successfully with good resolution is a key skill of the sector. We shouldn't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it is, ultimately.
Yeah.
Yes, as long as we remember that, we won't be going too far wrong.
Too far wrong. No, indeed.
Kevin, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this programme. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry.
The Voice of Insurance is produced in association with Advantage Go. Release your underwriters to underwrite with Advantage Go's underwriting platform.
Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.